They say you can feel a storm before it arrives, somewhere in your chest, like a pressure drop. That night, I felt it settle between my ribs as I put down my fork and glanced at my watch. 7:30 p.m. exactly. 5 years ago, almost to the minute, I stepped into this house with 2 suitcases and the fragile hope of a happy old age spent surrounded by those I loved. Funny how memory carves turning points into stone. "Grandma, you're looking at that old clock again," remarked Gar, my 13-year-old grandson, the only one in the house who still noticed the little things about me. Gestures. Habits. The way I smiled at old furniture. "They tell the right time, honey," I said, offering a soft smile. "Unlike your electronic gizmos." Lydia, my only daughter, rolled her eyes. A gesture that had evolved over the years into her signature expression of disapproval. At 42, she looked remarkably like she had in high school, the same impatience with other people's thoughts, the same smugness that now lived between crow's feet carved by time and tension. Fergus, her husband, methodically carved the roast beef, pretending the conversation didn't exist. Tall, prematurely gray, with a polished detachment of a man used to commanding rooms in silence. He had been the chief physician at AASO's private clinic for 16 years, respected in the city, feared in his home. "Mom, would you mind not starting?" Lydia said, her voice coated in the condescension reserved for toddlers and the elderly. "It's been a hard day." "I didn't start," I replied quietly, placing a little salad on my plate. "I was just answering G." Across the table, 16-year-old Cassandra didn't lift her eyes from the phone hidden in her lap. Her fingers, long and pale with black-painted nails, moved over the screen in a blur, texting friends who, no doubt, seemed more valuable than family dinners. She was in that cruel stage of adolescence when everything feels like a performance, and parents are background noise. "Cassie," I said gently, "why don't you put the phone away for dinner?" I had said it hundreds of times before. But tonight, those few words struck a nerve. Lydia exploded, slamming her fork onto the table. "Oh my God, Mom! Can you for once not tell us how to raise our children? If Cassie wants to sit on her phone, that's our business." I froze, the shame bleeding into the air like spilled wine. Gar stared at his plate. Cassie looked up, startled. Her eyes widened. "I was just suggesting," I murmured. "You're always just suggesting," Lydia snapped. "Every dinner, every conversation. You can't help yourself. Why can't you just sit back and be grateful we're sheltering you?" Fergus finally lifted his head. Irritation rippled across his face, but no surprise. He had been waiting for this moment. Maybe even preparing it. "Lydia," he said in the measured voice he used to deliver unpleasant diagnoses, "I don't think your mother fully realizes the burden she's placed on our family." "Burden?" I echoed, my hands trembling. "I sold my house to be closer to you. I help with the kids. I cook. I clean." "Which we're redoing anyway," Lydia cut in. "You can't even vacuum properly." The color flooded my cheeks. A 72-year-old woman being criticized like a lazy maid. "And your endless stories," she continued, the words tumbling out like a broken dam. "No one cares what bread cost in the 70s or how you met Dad." "Children often ask," I said, glancing at my grandchildren. Gar gave a tiny nod, but then looked away quickly, afraid to meet his father's gaze. "They're just being polite," Fergus said coldly. "Unlike their grandmother, who can't understand boundaries." Something clenched inside me then. 5 years of small humiliations, whispered resentments, forgotten kindnesses, and now this. Crystal clear. They didn't want me here. Maybe they never had. "I moved here at your request," I reminded myself aloud, forcing calm into my voice. "When you said the kids needed a grandmother. That was before you turned into a grouchy old woman who criticizes everything." Lydia shouted. Before you started spying on us, sticking your nose into our business. I froze. They knew. Or at least suspected. The secret I'd silently carried for 3 years now sat at the table like an invisible guest. Watched. Heard. Unforgiven. I'm not spying, I said, my mouth dry. I just live here. And that's the problem. Lydia screamed, standing so violently her chair skidded back. You live here. You're always here, watching, judging, interfering. You're a burden to our family. Go away. Silence followed. Deafening. Cassandra dropped her phone. It hit the parquet with a sharp clatter. Gar seemed to stop breathing. Fergus wiped his mouth with deliberate slowness, as if attending a business meeting instead of a domestic crucifixion. Lydia, he finally said, voice low, I don't think this is the most constructive approach. Hope flickered. Was he going to defend me? But then, Barl deserves a chance to correct her behavior. We can discuss house rules. I turned to Lydia, begging silently for a flicker of compassion. But she crossed her arms tightly across her chest, eyes burning. No, Fergus. I can't take it anymore. Either she leaves, or I take the children and go to my sister's. It's your choice. I stood. My legs felt like cotton, but my spine stayed straight. Decades of elementary teaching had trained me to hold my posture even when my soul wanted to collapse. That won't be necessary, I said, shocked by the steadiness in my voice. I'll leave. Grandma, no. Gar cried, his voice cracking as he stood halfway. That's not what Mom meant. That's exactly what I meant, Lydia cut him off. And don't try to manipulate the children, Mom. It's beneath even you. I looked at them, Gar, stricken, Cassandra, confused. In 5 years I had watched them grow, taught them, kissed bruised knees, cried over their heartbreaks. I loved them more deeply than language could hold. Then I looked around the table. Fergus, cold and composed. Lydia, flushed and unforgiving. My family. My mistake. I turned, walked slowly toward the stairs, my knees aching with each step, not just from arthritis, but from the unbearable weight of what had just happened. Behind me, the stunned faces of my grandchildren, the piercing silence of my daughter, the final confirmation that I was no longer welcome. I entered the small upstairs room, the one they let me call my own. A narrow bed. An old dresser. A desk I'd brought from the only home I'd ever owned. My heart thudded. But my decision was made. And tomorrow I would leave, with or without their blessing. I'd insisted on keeping that desk when I moved in. It was the same one I used to grade homework on when I was still teaching elementary school, the same surface where I penned letters to my husband during his business trips, letters I'd often reread during his final months. Now it sat quietly by the window, gathering dust, holding a single framed photograph of G and Cassandra, taken 3 Christmases ago, before adolescents thinned their smiles into strained lines and digital distractions. I reached beneath the bed and pulled out the same suitcase I had arrived with 5 years ago. I still remembered Lydia's voice on the phone after my father passed. She had spoken with a gentleness then, a coaxing affection I now understood had an agenda. She said the kids needed their grandmother nearby, that the house I lived in was too big, too empty, that AASO had the best schools for G and Cassie. I had sold my home of 40 years, my friends, my routine, my garden, and stepped into their world believing I was stepping into my next chapter. The first year felt almost idyllic. I helped with the children, cooked dinners on weekends, told old family stories. Fergus was distant but polite. The children still young enough to enjoy bedtime tales and board games, still unarmored by teenage indifference. Then, slowly, something began to shift. Barely noticeable at first. Lydia's offhand remarks about how I folded the towels, the forced smile when I chopped vegetables differently. Fergus's tight-lipped silence when I spoke about the past. Politeness turned to tension, tension to critique, critique to contempt. And now, here I was, folding sweaters into my suitcase, methodically, deliberately, packing away the last of my place in this house. A light knock broke the silence. G stood at the threshold, his usual sparkle dulled with worry. "Grandma," he whispered, glancing back nervously. "Are you really leaving?" "I am, dear," I said gently, folding a blouse. Sometimes, even adults need space from one another. "But where will you go? It's almost 9 o'clock." I gave him a small, reassuring smile, hoping it didn't show the strain underneath. "I'm going to call Winfred. Remember her? We went to her house for tea last fall. She lives in that big place on Maple Street." "The lady with the cats?" He wrinkled his nose, then corrected himself. "You mean your friend who gave us those raisin cookies?" "That's right." I chuckled softly, pulling a photo album off the shelf. "She's my oldest friend. We went to college together." G hesitated. "Mom said you could come back if you started to, He fumbled, clearly repeating words planted in his ear. "Respect their boundaries." I sighed quietly. Lydia, always the manipulator, still using her children as pawns in adult games. I walked over and placed my hands on his small, slumped shoulders. "Honey, some things are more complicated than they seem. Sometimes people need to separate in order to find their way back to each other. And sometimes, breaking up is just the end of the story." I didn't tell him that I wasn't coming back. That apologies wouldn't undo what had been said, or what I had discovered. That his father and mother were involved in things no 13-year-old should ever have to understand. "Will you leave your number?" he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. My heart squeezed. "Of course," I said, tearing a page from my notebook and scribbling my cell number. "Call me any time. And make sure Cassandra gets it too." At that moment, Lydia appeared in the doorway. Her face was rigid, her expression torn between fury and fatigue. Her eyes were red, but I recognized that redness. Rage, not regret. "Garth," she said firmly, "it's time to do your homework." "But Mom, right now." Her voice cracked like a whip. He cast me one last look, helpless, guilty, and walked away. Lydia turned back to me. "I hope you're not filling his head with stories about what a terrible mother I am." "I would never do that," I replied calmly. "Unlike you, I don't involve children in adult games." Her face twisted. "You never understood me," she spat. "Always acting like you knew better. Always looking down on me." I shook my head, slowly closing my suitcase. "No, Lydia. I've always looked at you with love. With concern, yes. Sometimes confusion. But always with love. If you loved me," her voice trembled now, "you'd respect my decisions. My family. My marriage." I looked at her hands, fists clenched, knuckles white with tension. And for a moment, I saw the little girl who used to run to me in the park, dandelions clenched in her tiny hand, proud of her bouquet. That girl was gone. "Love doesn't mean blindness," I said quietly. "I see what's going on in this house. I know what you and Fergus are doing." Her eyes widened, a flicker of something close to fear passed through them, but she masked it quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "I think you do," I said. "The fake reports. The hidden side effects. You and Fergus playing God with people's lives. All for money. Reputation." She paled. Her hand rose to her throat, an old nervous habit. "You're delusional. Just old." "Then why are you so desperate to get rid of me?" I asked, lifting my suitcase. "Why now, just as the clinical trials are ending?" She took a step back. "Get out," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Just Get out of my house. I walked past her, feeling a strange serenity wash over me. For 5 years I had feared this moment, losing the last link to my family. But as I stepped into the hallway, I didn't feel grief. I felt relief. Fergus was waiting at the stairs, crisp and composed. Shirt ironed to perfection, his face the picture of suburban virtue. The respected doctor. The flawless father. No one would suspect this man was falsifying drug trial results that could harm or even kill. "Let me help you with your suitcase," he said, voice smooth as glass. The smile was just a little too tight. I handed it over without a word and followed him down, gripping the railing as my knees protested, but I didn't falter. Not now. Cassandra was in the hallway. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. Unlike her mother, the pain was real. Her phone, for once, was nowhere in sight. "Grandma," she whispered, stepping forward, "I'm going to miss you." I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her apple-scented shampoo, the same one she'd used since childhood. My heart ached. "I'll miss you too, sweetheart, but we'll see each other again. I promise." "Cassandra!" Lydia's voice echoed down from upstairs. "Go to your room." "But Mom." "Now." Cassie flinched, gave me one last look, then turned and disappeared upstairs. A door slammed. Fergus opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. I followed, pausing for just a moment to look back at the house I'd once thought would be my last home. The photos I had hung, the artificial flowers I'd placed on the side table last spring, the coat hook I'd used every day. All small, fragile imprints of my presence. Soon they would fade. The evening air was brisk, the kind of cold that sneaks into your bones and reminds you winter's coming. October in AASO could never make up its mind, warm during the day, cruel by night. I wished I'd taken my coat from the hallway, but I couldn't bring myself to step back inside. Not now. Not for that. Fergus didn't stop at the porch. He walked to the gate, opened it, and stepped onto the sidewalk. With a quick movement, he let my suitcase drop. Not tossed, but not placed either. Just discarded. "I called a cab," he said flatly, not looking at me. "It'll be here in 10 minutes. "Thank you," I replied, lifting my chin as the wind curled around me. I said, surprised at my own calm, "That's very thoughtful of you." Fergus grimaced at the sarcasm but remained silent. We stood facing each other, an old woman and a man in the prime of his life. Mother-in-law and son-in-law. Two people who had never truly understood one another. "You know, Fergus," I said finally, "when Lydia first brought you to meet me, I thought she'd made a wise choice. Successful, educated, from a good family. You seemed grounded. Reliable." He tensed, as if bracing for the blow. "But the years," I continued, "have a way of peeling back illusions. And beneath all that surface respectability is a man who's willing to gamble with his patients' lives, for profit." "I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly, but his eyes flickered, something I recognized as fear. "I'm talking about the ART 43 clinical trials," I said, my tone even. "The falsified reports. The 20% of patients with serious side effects that somehow never made it into the final data. The reports you and Lydia conveniently ignored." His face drained of color. In the dim light of the street lamp, he looked almost waxen. "These are absurd accusations," he hissed, lowering his voice, glancing nervously at the rows of quiet suburban homes. "Are they?" I raised an eyebrow. "What about the copies I made of the original reports? Or the recording of your phone call with the pharma rep, where you explicitly discuss omitting the data?" I didn't actually have a recording, but I had overheard that call, standing just outside the door left ajar. Fergus didn't need to know the difference. Bluff or not, his expression confirmed his guilt. His fear morphed into rage. You've been spying on me, in my own house, he growled. I accidentally overheard it, I corrected. Then I started noticing things. It's hard not to notice when something feels wrong. He took a sharp step forward, fists clenched. For a fleeting second, I thought he might strike me. But he didn't. He stopped himself, visibly restraining the impulse. What do you want? He muttered through clenched teeth. Money. I let out a bitter laugh. You still don't get it, do you? I'm not a blackmailer, Fergus. I'm a mother who still hopes her daughter has a soul left. A grandmother who doesn't want her grandchildren growing up in a house built on lies. Then why stay silent for 3 years? He asked, squinting at me, suspicious. If you're so moral, so righteous? I looked away. I'd asked myself that same question 100 times. Because I was afraid, I answered quietly. Afraid of losing them. Afraid that exposing you would destroy everything. I told myself maybe the side effects weren't that serious. I rationalized your choices because I didn't want to believe my daughter could be complicit in something so corrupt. Then I met his gaze head-on. But today you and Lydia made that decision for me. You threw me out of the very family I was afraid to lose. And now, Fergus, I have nothing left to protect. No reason left to stay silent. At that moment, a yellow cab pulled to the curb. The driver, a young man with a 5 o'clock shadow and tired eyes, rolled down the window. Mrs. Sangwain? He asked. Yes, I said without taking my eyes off Fergus. That's me. The driver stepped out to retrieve the suitcase. Fergus stood motionless on the sidewalk, his face locked in a strange blend of disbelief and fury. You wouldn't dare, he hissed. Think of Lydia. Think of the children. They're all I ever think about, I said, stepping toward the open cab door. That's why I stayed silent for 5 years. But silence has a price. And sometimes, telling the truth is the only way to protect the people you love. I got into the cab and shut the door. Through the window, I saw him still standing there, statue still, the porch light casting harsh shadows on his face. Our eyes met for a brief, frozen moment, and what I saw in his was not guilt, not concern. It was fear. Not fear for the patients, not for Lydia, not for what they'd done, but fear for himself. The cab rolled away from the house that had once been my home, from the daughter who had banished me, from the 2 grandchildren I would have done anything for. Yet, I didn't feel exiled. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free from fear. From compromise. From silence. The phone buzzed inside my purse. Lydia's name lit the screen. I didn't answer. Whatever she had to say, it was too late. My stance was clear, and there would be no going back. The Riverview Hotel was modest but clean. Dim chandeliers hung over a quiet lobby filled with hushed jazz and worn furniture. The night clerk was a young man with a corporate smile that faded into mild concern when he saw an elderly woman standing at the front desk with only one suitcase. Good evening, he said with rote cheer. How can I help you? I need a room, I replied, sliding my credit card toward him. One night. I nodded. He handed me a keycard and gestured down the corridor. No questions, no fuss. Just blessed indifference. In a town like AASO, where gossip traveled faster than wind, that was rare. The room was nondescript, beige walls, bland artwork, a stiff bed with starched linens, and a window that looked out onto the parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap, and finally let it sink in. I'd been thrown out. My daughter had screamed that I was a burden. My son-in-law had tried to intimidate me into silence. My grandchildren had watched me leave, stunned and scared. And yet, I didn't cry. The tears weren't there. What filled me instead was a heavy mix of bitterness and clarity. For 5 years I had tolerated little cruelties, daily erasures of dignity, the knowledge of crimes I was too afraid to expose. And still, they discarded me like an expired warranty. The phone vibrated again. A message from Lydia. I hope you realize what you've done. It's too late to apologize now. I smiled coldly. Typical Lydia. Even now, when she had done the unforgivable, I was supposed to feel guilty. A second buzz. Gee, this time. Grandma, are you okay? Mom said you said something stupid. My heart twisted. That poor boy, caught in adult warfare. I typed quickly. I'm fine, honey. Don't worry. Focus on school. Be a good brother to Cassandra. A moment later. When are you coming back? That question broke something inside me. I stared at the screen, uncertain what to say. The truth would sting. A lie would dishonor everything I'd just done. Finally, I typed. Let's talk later. For now, it's best not to text me until your parents calm down. He replied, Okay. I set the phone aside and rubbed my temples. The headache from dinner had matured into a dull ache behind my eyes. It was nearing 11 p.m., too late to call Winifred. But I knew she wouldn't mind. I dialed. Barl. Her voice, worn from years of smoking, sounded instantly alert. You never call this late. I took a breath and told her everything. The dinner. The screaming. The threats. The banishment. The suitcase. The hotel. There was a pause, then her response. That pompous turkey and your arrogant daughter put you on the street? She was livid. I would have come for you, she said. Why didn't you call sooner? I needed time to think. Think, she snorted. You're moving in with me tomorrow. I've got 4 bedrooms and 1 lazy cat. Plenty of space. And you've wasted enough of your life on that ungrateful lot. For the first time that night, I truly smiled. Winifred, decisive, brash, impossible, had always been my anchor. Since college. You're sure? I asked. This could be long-term. I hope it's forever, she snapped. I've been begging you to move in for years. You finally made the right choice. Even if they forced your hand. We agreed she'd pick me up at 10 a.m. The call ended. The weight in my chest lightened a little. I took a hot shower, letting the water wash away the residue of humiliation, and climbed into the sterile hotel bed. Sleep came slowly. My mind ran loops, playing what-ifs and alternate endings. But there was no changing it now. Lydia had cast me out. At 72, I was starting over. The next morning, golden sunlight pierced through the thin curtains. I'd slept in, nearly 9 a.m., but still felt exhausted. I dressed, packed, and checked out. Then I sat on the hotel bench in the crisp October sun, watching the small town of AASO wake up around me. At exactly 10 a.m., Winifred's silver Volvo pulled up. She stepped out with purpose, lipstick bold, gray hair cropped smartly, spine straight like a commander on parade. Barl, she said, opening her arms. I went to her. Gratefully. My dear, she murmured, holding me close. I'm furious with your daughter. Don't waste your energy, I replied quietly. What's done is done. She snorted, but didn't argue. She grabbed my suitcase and loaded it into the trunk like a soldier deploying. I've got the blue room ready for you, she said as we pulled into her driveway. The one facing the garden. You always said it was the prettiest. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. She wasn't just offering shelter. She was offering healing. Thank you, I whispered. There's nothing to thank, she replied. Remember how you saved me after Gerald died? You cooked, cleaned, dragged me outside. You didn't let me disappear into grief. She squeezed my hand. Now it's my turn. Winifred's home stood proudly on Maple Street, a classic Victorian mansion with a mansard roof, sweeping porch, and vibrant garden. Her late husband, an architect, had designed it himself. It radiated care, strength, memory. Inside, we were greeted by Oscar, her elderly gray cat, surveying the hallway from his windowsill perch like a judge in robes. "He thinks he owns the place," she chuckled. She guided me to the parlor, elegant yet cozy, filled with both antiques and modern touches, like her, timeless with sparks of rebellion. "Make yourself at home," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. And as I sat in that room I'd visited for decades, where tea had been shared and advice freely given, I realized something. I hadn't just left something behind. I had returned to something, too. Something real. Something kind. Something that might finally be home. She poured the tea with practiced hands, steam curling between us like a shared secret. "So," she said, placing the cup in front of me, "what's your plan?" I sighed and took a sip. "Honestly, I don't have one. Everything happened so fast. All I know is that I won't go back to Lydia, not even if she begged me, which I highly doubt she would. And frankly, she'd be right not to." Winifred nodded, unsurprised. "You've tolerated their neglect for too long. But that's not what I mean." She leaned forward slightly. "What are you going to do about what you know? About Fergus? About the Minations?" I tensed. Of course she remembered. I'd confided in her 2 years ago when I first stumbled upon the discrepancies in Fergus's research data. The unease that had since morphed into certainty. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to forget all of it. Just start a new life, clean slate. But another part of me, the part that still has a conscience, knows that keeping quiet makes me complicit." Winifred looked at me closely over the rim of her glasses, her expression unreadable. "What did you say to Fergus when you left?" I hesitated, embarrassed by the memory of our tense standoff on the sidewalk. "I implied I wouldn't keep their secrets anymore." "Implied?" She arched a perfectly skeptical eyebrow. "Or said?" I gave a small, reluctant smile. "More like said. Directly." I was angry and disappointed. I didn't exactly soften the blow. "Then you have no choice," she said, setting her teacup down with a soft thud that seemed to echo louder than expected. "If you told him that, he's not going to sit around twiddling his thumbs. He'll act. Probably before you do. He'll try to discredit you, Barl. Say you've got dementia, that you're vengeful because you were exiled, that you've always hated him. If you're going to do this, really do this, you have to act first." I knew she was right. Fergus wasn't the kind of man to let a threat hang unchallenged. But I voiced the fear that had held me captive for so long. What if I'm wrong? What if I misread the data? Misheard the conversation? Winifred reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Barl, you were a math teacher for 30 years. You know how to read numbers. If you say there were discrepancies, there were discrepancies. You heard him talking. You saw the documents. Trust your intuition." I nodded slowly, feeling something awaken inside me. Something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. "For 5 years," I said softly, "I kept quiet. I let them do what they did, all while pretending not to see it. But not anymore." "Good," she said. "So what's the next step?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But we have to act." A slow, knowing smile spread across Winifred's face, sharp and fierce. "Well then, it's a good thing I have a plan. And some useful contacts." We spent the next few hours tucked away in her cozy office, a storm of papers and ideas swirling around us. Winifred, ever resourceful, still had friends in important places. The editor of the AASO Chronicle, for one. She also knew the chairman of the town's medical board, and her son Marcus worked at a respected law firm 2 towns over. Between the three, we had avenues. After a quick lunch of reheated soup and buttered bread, Winifred showed me to my new room. It was more than I'd expected. Spacious, filled with natural light, a sturdy bed with crisp linens, a small desk nestled beneath a wide window that looked out onto the garden. Even in October, the roses still held on. I stood at the window for a long time, just watching the petals move gently in the breeze. "Make yourself at home," Winifred said as she left. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll plan your revenge." "It's not revenge, Winnie," I said, shaking my head. "It's justice." She winked at me before closing the door. "Whatever you say, darling." Alone now, I began to unpack. I hung what little clothing I had, lined up my toiletries in the bathroom, placed my worn paperback novels on the nightstand. The room already felt more like home than Lydia's house ever had. I sat by the window and let myself absorb it all. Just yesterday, I'd been an invisible shadow in my daughter's mansion, quietly eating my dinners, pretending not to see what I saw. Today, I was at the start of something far bigger, something dangerous, yes, but empowering. I wasn't scared anymore. Or rather, I was, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. My phone buzzed. A message from Cassandra. "Grandma, are you okay? Mom says you're living in a hotel. Is that true? I'm worried." I smiled, my throat tight with emotion. I replied, "I'm fine, honey. I'm staying with Winifred. Remember her? The one with the cat and the raisin cookies. Don't worry about me." A minute later. "Can I come over after school? Mom can't know." I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to get her in trouble or force her to lie. But I also knew I needed to see her, if only for a moment. "Let me talk to your mom first," I typed. "I don't want you to lie or get in trouble because of me." "Mom said you said something nasty about Dad," Cassandra wrote quickly. "And that we shouldn't hang out with you." A quiet sigh escaped me. Of course Lydia would try to poison them against me. I knew it was coming, but it still pierced like a thorn. "Let's meet at the Green Tea Cafe tomorrow at 4, I wrote after thinking it through. "Just say you're meeting a friend for a school project. Please don't lie directly." "Thank you, Grandma. I miss you." I blinked away tears. 2 simple words. I miss you. No performance. No manipulation. Just longing. That night, Winifred and I sat together again in her study, papers spread out across the desk like puzzle pieces. Among them were the copies I'd secretly made, the original reports, including the side effect data, and the sanitized versions Fergus had submitted to the pharmaceutical company. "This is enough to at least start an inquiry," Winifred said, studying the sheets. "But a full investigation needs more. Recent documents, corroboration." I shook my head. "He's been careful lately. The last 6 months, everything's under lock and key. No files left open. No loose lips." "A shame," she murmured, tapping her fingers thoughtfully. "But this should be enough to start rattling the cage. Tomorrow I'll call Jeremy, the chairman of the medical board. See if we can schedule a meeting. Then Helena at the Chronicle. She's always looking for a juicy scandal." "Are you sure we should involve the press?" I asked, the hesitation surfacing again. "What if it hurts the children?" Winifred gave me a long, compassionate look. "Barl, I know you want to protect them, but if Fergus is falsifying data for a drug going to market, it's not just about your family anymore. It's about real people. Real lives. This isn't family drama, it's criminal." She was right. Staying silent now wasn't kindness, it was complicity. But the thought of Cassandra and G suffering because of what I exposed made my stomach knot. "Let's try the official route first," I said. "Go to the board. Maybe even the pharmaceutical company's ethics department. If they fail, then we go public. Winifred nodded, though I could tell she preferred a more direct strike. Just remember, she said, Fergus won't go down quietly. He'll protect his empire. And defenses get messy. I remembered the cold way he'd dropped my suitcase on the sidewalk. The stiff, hollow threat in his voice. Think of Lydia. Think of the kids. As if the cost of silence was supposed to be my soul. I understand the risk, I said. But after the way they ended things, I have no more illusions left. They made their choice. Winifred squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Barl. I always knew, under that soft exterior, there was a spine of steel. I smiled faintly. Let's hope it's enough. We spent another hour ironing out the details of the plan. After that, Winifred left to call her son, and I stayed behind in her office, surrounded by papers, my thoughts swirling as I combed through documents and recollections. I tried to reconstruct the timeline, everything I'd seen and heard over the last 3 years. The truth was undeniable now. The side effects Fergus had worked so hard to bury weren't minor, they were serious. Liver damage. Neurological symptoms. Roughly 20% of the patients in the ART-43 trial had developed complications. But the versions of the reports submitted to the pharmaceutical company painted a different picture, just 3% affected, small enough to be chalked up as statistical error. An acceptable range, Fergus once said on a phone call to a colleague, his voice casual, calculating. I'd never forget that tone. I remembered how it all started. I wasn't looking for evidence, just Fergus's cufflink. He'd accused me of ironing his shirt too harshly, said the cufflink had popped off. I'd gone into his office to search for it, opened a high shelf carelessly, and a box of papers tumbled to the floor. Amid the scattered mess, 2 nearly identical reports caught my eye. Same trial, same dates, but the figures didn't match. At first, I assumed it was a clerical mistake. A misprint. But then I overheard Fergus on the phone talking about correcting the data. Later that same week, I heard Lydia whispering to him, urging him to be cautious, to be more careful with the paperwork. Still, I stayed silent. I told myself I wasn't a doctor, that maybe I didn't fully understand what I'd seen or heard. That interfering could tear the family apart. And so I let it sit in the dark, this festering truth, because I thought I was protecting my daughter and her children. But now that Lydia herself had burned the bridge between us, had banished me without hesitation, I had no reason to protect anyone anymore. Fergus would have to answer for what he'd done. And Lydia, she'd have to answer for her complicity. I collected the documents and tucked them into the secure folder Winifred had offered to store in her safe. Then I stepped out onto the veranda, where she stood, leaning against the railing, a cigarette perched between 2 fingers. She turned slightly as I approached, giving me a guilty smile. I thought you'd quit, I said, sitting beside her. Old habits die hard, she replied, taking a drag. So do old secrets, I murmured, staring out at the garden. It was quiet. The October air carried the faintest chill, but not enough to be unpleasant. In the distance, a dog barked, a lonesome, disembodied sound. It all felt so peacefully disconnected from the storm that was about to hit our small community. Winifred turned toward me. Are you sure you want to go through with this? There's still time. You could forget everything. Stay here. Start fresh. No scandal. No war. I paused. I had thought about it. The idea of a quiet life with a trusted friend, free from conflict and ethical burdens, was tempting. I could see myself tending roses, drinking tea on this very veranda, leaving the past behind. But that was fantasy. I knew the truth, and knowing it came with responsibility. I have to do this, I said, my voice steady. Not for revenge. For what's right. She nodded, put out her cigarette in the ceramic tray, and placed a hand over mine. Then we do it together. Tomorrow morning, I'll call Jeremy. We'll take it one step at a time. And whatever happens, happens. The next day, I sat in her bright kitchen, cradling a mug of coffee. Through the large window, I watched Oscar, her cat, bathe himself lazily in a chair nearby. It was such a peaceful domestic moment, one completely at odds with the hurricane I'd set in motion. After breakfast, we moved quickly. Winifred contacted her old friend Jeremy Hammond, chairman of the city's medical board. He agreed to an emergency meeting that afternoon. When we arrived, he met us in his office, a sharp-eyed man with silver hair and an air of quiet authority. I laid the documents on his desk and walked him through what I knew. He read in silence, flipping through the pages with meticulous care. Then he took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Mrs. Sangwain," he said, his voice calm but weighty. "If this information is accurate, we're looking at a serious felony. Tampering with clinical trial data, that's not just unethical. It's criminal." "I understand," I said, keeping my tone as even as I could. "That's why I came to you first." He looked me in the eye. "You realize this will ruin your son-in-law's career and affect your entire family?" I nodded. "But if we don't stop him, people could suffer. The side effects he's hiding, they're not minor. They could cause permanent damage." Hammond studied me for a long beat, then nodded solemnly. "I'll initiate a formal investigation immediately. Be prepared to testify." After that, events escalated with surprising speed. The medical board contacted the pharmaceutical company Fergus worked for, triggering a separate internal review. Meanwhile, Winifred, never one to sit still, called Helena, the editor at the AASO Chronicle. She didn't give the story outright, but she made sure they'd be ready when the scandal broke. By that evening, barely 24 hours after I'd been cast out of Lydia's house, every local news outlet was humming with the story. Headlines flashed across screens and sites: "Renowned doctor accused of falsifying clinical trial data." "Dr. Fergus Abbott under investigation." "Clinic temporarily closed." There, on the front page of the Chronicle's online edition, was a picture of Fergus. Last year's charity gala. Smiling, composed, the epitome of professionalism. It made my stomach churn. "I think it started," Winifred said, stepping into the kitchen with her tablet. "Fergus has just been taken out of the clinic in handcuffs. Apparently, he was shouting about conspiracies. Slander. Typical." I didn't feel triumph, just a deep, hollow fatigue. A dull ache, somewhere between nausea and relief. "You did the right thing, Barl," Winifred said softly, resting a hand on my shoulder. "He endangered lives. For what? Money. Reputation." I nodded but said nothing. In my mind, I knew she was right. But emotionally, all I could see was the aftermath. Lydia. The kids. The implosion of everything I'd tried to keep intact for so long. Then the phone rang. Lydia's name lit up on the screen. My thumb hovered over the answer button. "You don't have to pick up," Winifred said gently. "I do," I said. "I have to hear her." I pressed the button. Silence, then ragged breathing. Then her voice, raw and furious. "How could you?" Lydia demanded. "How could you do this to us?" "Lydia," I began, trying to stay calm. "Your husband falsified test results. People, real people, could have gotten hurt." "You don't understand anything," she cried. "You ruined everything. Our family, our reputation, our lives. And for what? To get back at us for asking you to move out." "This isn't revenge," I said firmly. "If it were something minor, I would have let it go. But this isn't a small thing." "Not a small thing," she hissed. "He was arrested in front of our kids, Mom. The police are combing through our house. They're interrogating my children." My children! I closed my eyes, my heart squeezing painfully as I imagined G and Cassandra, bewildered and terrified in the chaos. The guilt stabbed deep. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I never wanted the kids to be part of this. But you and Fergus, you knew the risks." "I didn't do anything," Lydia screamed again, her voice cracked and sharp with panic. "I was just supporting my husband. That's normal." "You knew, Lydia," I said, gently but firmly. "I heard your conversations. You weren't just supporting him. You were helping him hide the truth." A long, heavy silence followed. Then her voice came again, smaller now, thinned with fear. "They're accusing me of complicity," she said, barely above a whisper. "I've been fired. No severance. No job offers. I might lose my license to practice. Do you even realize what you've done?" "Lydia," I faltered, trying to summon the right words, something that might reach her through the fog of her unraveling life. "I do understand that this is hard for you. But please think of the patients. Think of what could have happened if that drug went to market with falsified safety data." "Don't you dare lecture me," she snapped, her anger rekindled. "You betrayed your own daughter. That's unforgivable. And you threw your mother out of your house," I replied quietly. "I think that makes us even." The line went still. I could hear her breathing, harsh, uneven, as if my words had struck a place she didn't want to acknowledge. Then she hissed, low and bitter, "You know what? You're not my mother anymore. And you're not my children's grandmother. Forget about us. Forever." With that, she hung up. I set the phone down on the table, not slamming it, just placing it gently like something breakable. I didn't feel rage. I didn't cry. There was just this numbness spreading through me like fog. A part of me, however naive, had hoped Lydia would at least recognize the seriousness of what she and Fergus had done, that she might feel remorse. But all she saw was betrayal. My betrayal. She couldn't see her own guilt. "She's in shock," Winifred said softly, setting a fresh cup of coffee in front of me. "Give her time to understand." I shook my head. "No, Winnie. She won't forgive me. And if I'm honest, I don't know if I can forgive her either." Just then, Winifred's phone rang. She answered, listened briefly, then covered the receiver. "It's Helena, from the Chronicle. She wants to interview you. As a whistleblower." No, I didn't hesitate. No interviews. I did what needed to be done. I don't want publicity. Winifred relayed my answer, then hung up. "I understand," she said, her voice kind. "But just know, there are people out there who think you're a hero. Not everyone has the strength to stand up to family." I gave a dry, bitter smile. "A hero? I doubt Gar and Cassandra see me that way." As if summoned by the thought, the phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Grandma." Cassandra's voice came through in a whisper, muffled like she was hiding under a blanket. "Is that you?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, my throat tightening. "It's me. Are you okay?" "I don't know," she said, honest in a way only a teenager trying to be brave can be. "Everything here is weird. Dad's been taken away by the police. Mom's crying and screaming. G locked himself in his room and won't talk to anyone. My heart broke. I'm so sorry, honey. This isn't your fault, or your brother's." "Is it true?" she asked, her voice even softer now. "What they say about Dad? That he faked some medical stuff?" I hesitated. How do you answer a question like that from a 16-year-old girl? But I couldn't lie. "Yes," I said finally. "I found proof. I gave it to the medical board." "Is that why you left us?" she asked, and the confusion in her voice was like a knife. "Because of Daddy's job?" No, sweet girl. I left because your mom asked me to. Do you remember that night at dinner? I do, she said faintly. She was yelling at you. I thought, I thought you two would make up. Sometimes adults can't make up, I said softly. But that doesn't mean I stopped loving you. Or G. There was a pause, then Cassandra said, quieter still, Mom says you betrayed our family. That you always hated Dad. That you wanted to hurt him. I sighed, expecting this. I never wanted to hurt your father, I said, my voice firm. But what he did was wrong. And dangerous. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to do the right thing. I have to go, she whispered suddenly. Mom's coming. I'll call later if I can. The line went dead. I sat there, phone still in hand, staring into the silence, my chest heavy with all the things I hadn't said. The day dragged on. The news grew more intense. The Fergus clinic had been officially shut down. Patients were being redirected. The pharmaceutical company issued a statement denying all knowledge of misconduct and pledging full cooperation with the investigation. By late afternoon, the story had reached a fever pitch. Local TV anchors used phrases like medical scandal of the year. There were clips of Fergus being led out of the courthouse in handcuffs, his face pale and drawn, and interviews with former patients now threatening legal action. They're saying lawsuits have already started, Winifred muttered as she flipped channels. And this is only the beginning. I nodded quietly, watching the man I had lived under the same roof with for 5 years fall apart in front of the world. Strange, I murmured. I've known that man for 16 years, but I don't think I ever really knew him. People hide who they are, Winifred said gently, especially from the ones closest to them. That evening, G called. His voice was sharp, not whispered like his sister's. At 13, he sounded older, harder than his years. Why didn't you tell me the truth? He said without greeting. When I messaged you yesterday, you could have warned me. Warned you about what, sweetheart? That you were turning Dad in. Everyone at school knew before I did. I looked like an idiot. Pain stabbed through me. I hadn't thought about how fast gossip spreads in a small town. How cruel children can be. I'm sorry, G. I didn't want you to find out that way. They're saying Dad's a criminal. That he's going to jail. Is it true? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Your dad made a mistake. A serious one. And now he has to take responsibility. But no matter what happens, he's still your dad. He still loves you. If he loved me, G said, bitterness creeping into his voice, he wouldn't do things that got him arrested. That sentence, so wise in its simplicity, wounded me deeply. Adults mess up too, I said quietly. Sometimes in big, terrible ways. He was silent for a moment. Did Mom make a mistake too? I hesitated. Yes, I said finally. She knew. She helped him hide it. But I know she loves you and Cassandra more than anything. Then why does she scream all the time? Why does she say such horrible things about you? Why did she make you leave? She's scared, I whispered. And when people are scared, they say things they don't mean. Mom says you betrayed the family. That you've always hated Dad. That's not true, I said firmly. I loved all of you, including your father. But sometimes, you have to choose between what's easy and what's right. And you chose right? He asked, his voice quiet, steady. Yes, I said. I hope someday you'll understand why. After the call ended, I didn't move. I stared at the darkened garden through the window. Winifred, ever intuitive, left me alone. Late that night, as we sat sipping herbal tea in the living room, the phone rang again. Winifred picked it up, and her expression darkened. She glanced at me, concerned. "It's Lydia," she said. "She wants to talk to you. But I really don't think this is the right time." I reached for the phone. "It's okay," I said. "I'll take it." "Are you satisfied now?" Lydia's voice rasped. Raw. Broken. She sounded like she'd been crying for hours. Or screaming. "Did you get what you wanted?" She spat. "Lydia," I began wearily. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. Especially not the children." "It's too late to think about children," she yelled. "Fergus is under house arrest. He's out on bail, but we can't leave town. The clinic is closed. I've lost my job. Our accounts are frozen. We can't even pay the mortgage. Have you thought about that?" "You have a degree," I reminded her gently. "You'll find work. You still have your house." "Our house?" She cut in with a bitter laugh. "Do you know what it's like out here? No one talks to us. Neighbors turn their backs. Friends won't return our calls. Peggy Thornton, my best friend from college, canceled our lunch. Said she wasn't comfortable being seen with me." I closed my eyes. I hadn't considered the fallout beyond the legal and medical. The social exile. The humiliation. "I'm sorry," I said honestly. "But you and Fergus made that choice when you decided to cover up the trial results." "I didn't fake anything," she screamed. "I just helped my husband." "Complicity is a crime," I said gently. "And you, my own mother," Lydia hissed, "are going to testify against me?" I paused. That truth was a heavier burden than any document I had handed over. "I will only tell the truth," I said at last. "Whatever it costs." I finally said what I saw and heard. I replied, my voice steady. "If that makes me a betrayer in your eyes, then so be it." "You did betray your family," Lydia said bitterly, spitting each word like it was poison. "No," I said firmly. "You betrayed medical ethics by helping Fergus cover up the dangerous side effects of that drug. You risked innocent lives. For money, for prestige. That's the real betrayal." There was a long, bruising silence. Then her voice came back, quieter now, almost eerily calm. "I always thought you were weak. Quiet. Submissive. Always giving in. But it turns out you're the most cruel and calculating person I know. Congratulations, Mom. You've won. Our lives are ruined." She hung up before I could respond. I lowered the phone slowly, not angry, just hollowed out by her words. "She's in shock," Winifred murmured, gently taking the phone from my hand. "Give her time to process what's happened." I shook my head. "No, Winnie. She'll never forgive me. And I don't know if I can forgive her." I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, turning everything over in my mind, the choices I had made, the storm they had unleashed. I knew I had done the right thing, but the price was high. I had likely lost my daughter forever and put my relationship with my grandchildren at risk. Ferguson and Lydia's world had imploded, financially, socially, emotionally. The reputation they had so carefully curated in this town was in ruins. And yet, as morning finally bled into the sky and exhaustion tugged at my eyes, I felt no regret. Only a quiet, aching certainty. I had done what was necessary. Even if it meant carrying that burden alone for the rest of my life. 3 months passed in a blur. January came to Aso in a hush of snow, coating everything in serene whiteness, transforming the town into a postcard scene. Sitting by the window in Winifred's cozy living room, I watched snowflakes swirl in the pale light of the street lamps and reflected on how drastically my life had changed. The media storm surrounding Fergus had slowly calmed, but the investigation continued. The pharmaceutical company had severed all ties with him and launched a full-scale internal audit. His medical license remained suspended. His clinic, once bustling with activity, was shuttered. Most of the patients involved in the drug trial had joined a class action lawsuit. Lydia, too, had suffered fallout. She lost her position as clinic administrator, and according to G, she was still struggling to find a new job. But the shadow of being married to a disgraced physician loomed large. Many doors had slammed shut. Their financial situation had become precarious. They'd already sold one of their cars and dismissed the housekeeper. I watched it all unfold with complex emotions. I didn't gloat. I felt no joy in their suffering. But I didn't pity them either. They had made choices, dangerous, unethical ones. The consequences, however painful, were theirs to bear. "What's on your mind?" Winifred asked as she entered the living room, handing me a steaming mug of hot chocolate. "Family," I replied, accepting the cup with a small, grateful smile. "Today is G's 14th birthday. I sent a gift by courier, but I doubt Lydia will let him keep it." Winifred scoffed, settling across from me. "If she's going to rob her own son of a birthday present just out of spite, then she's even more foolish than I thought." "She's not foolish," I said quietly. "Just hurt. And afraid. Her world's crumbling around her." "A world built on lies," Winifred said, raising an eyebrow. "Eventually, they all fall." She had a point. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't help the flicker of sympathy that lingered. "Don't forget," she added, "we're meeting with Marcus tomorrow to finalize the education fund." I nodded. After weeks of thought, I had decided to set up an educational trust for both G and Cassandra. Whatever their parents had done, the children shouldn't suffer for it. With Marcus's help, a savvy lawyer and Winifred's son, we had arranged the fund so neither Fergus nor Lydia could access it. It would go directly toward the kids' college tuition and academic needs. "Do you think Lydia will see this as meddling?" I asked hesitantly. "She might," Winifred said with a shrug. "But that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it for the children. And that's all that matters." My life had shifted dramatically in just a few months. No longer the overlooked, tolerated grandmother on the margins of a picture-perfect family, I now lived freely and with purpose. Winifred and I shared her beautiful, sunlit home. We filled our days with art exhibits, theater outings, and book club discussions. At Christmas, we visited a lakeside town, staying in a quaint inn with roaring fireplaces. In February, we planned a short escape to Florida, chasing warmth and color in a season that had grown gray. Financially, I was independent again. The money I had once sunk into Fergus's investments was returned to me, part of the restitution the courts had begun to demand. It was only one piece in the long list of his misdeeds. Alongside my retirement savings, I now had enough to live with comfort and dignity. And yet, not all was healed. The greatest wound remained the silence between Lydia and me. She had made her position clear. Her last message, sent 2 weeks after Fergus's arrest, read simply, "I hope you're satisfied. Don't contact us again." No room for reconciliation. No acknowledgement of her own role. Just blame and banishment. With the grandchildren, the situation was more nuanced. Cassandra was cautious, pulled between loyalty to her parents and her lingering affection for me. Her messages were rare, short, often sent from borrowed phones. We had the occasional hushed call, little islands of connection in a sea of silence. But it was G who surprised me most. Despite being younger, he showed a startling clarity. He messaged me often, called when he could. A few times, he even visited, telling his parents he was going to a friend's house. On his most recent visit, just a week ago, we sat together at the kitchen table, cocoa steaming in our mugs. "I get why you did it, Grandma," he said, staring into the cup as if it held all the world's answers. "Dad wasn't doing the right thing. You couldn't just ignore that." "Thank you, G," I said softly, my throat tightening. "Not many adults understand it, let alone someone your age." "But Mom's still so mad," he muttered. She keeps saying you did this to punish us. That you wanted revenge. I sighed. Lydia's need to frame this as a personal vendetta was persistent and painful. Your mom is scared, I explained gently. And when people are afraid, they look for someone to blame. It's easier than looking at themselves. G looked up at me then, his eyes somber. How's Dad doing? I asked after a pause, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. G shrugged, the way boys do when they're unsure of their own feelings. I don't know, he admitted. He doesn't talk much, just sits in his office all day. Sometimes I hear him and Mom fighting at night. My heart clenched at the thought. Despite everything that had unfolded, I never wanted this to become a nightmare for my grandchildren. I gently shifted the conversation. And how about you? How's school going? He tried to smile, but the smile came out crooked and weary. It was hard at first, he said. Everyone was talking about Dad, pointing fingers. But it's better now. I have friends who don't care about all that. Then G hesitated before adding something that clearly weighed on him. Cassandra's having a harder time, he said softly. You know how she is. She's older, and people care more about stuff when you're 16. Some of her friends stopped talking to her. Her boyfriend broke up with her. She's doing worse in school now. Cries a lot. Stays in her room. I took in all of it, my heart aching. I didn't want any of this for them. But I also knew, deep in my bones, that what I had done was necessary. I couldn't remain silent and let Fergus endanger people's lives. Silence, in that case, would have been its own betrayal. The doorbell rang, snapping me from my thoughts. Across the hall, Winifred, reading on the armchair, looked up with a raised brow. Expecting someone? She asked. I shook my head. I wasn't. When I opened the door, my breath caught. Lydia stood there, pale and gaunt, with dark shadows beneath her eyes. May I come in? She asked, not meeting my gaze. We need to talk. I stood aside and let her in. She glanced around as if half expecting an ambush, and when her eyes landed on Winifred, she stiffened. Perhaps we'd better talk privately, she murmured. I nodded, and Winifred rose with quiet understanding, offering me a reassuring look before disappearing down the hallway. Have a seat, I said, gesturing toward the couch. Would you like some tea? No, Lydia said quickly. I didn't come to drink tea. But she sat anyway, perching on the edge of the sofa like someone who didn't know whether to stay or run. I sank into the chair across from her, bracing for what I feared would be another fight. Fergus is pleading guilty, she said abruptly. There's a plea bargain. He'll face probation and a hefty fine, but no jail time. I exhaled slowly, surprised by the wave of relief that swept over me. I'm glad the children won't lose their father, I replied honestly. Lydia shot me a quick, searching look, maybe trying to figure out if I meant it or was mocking her. Of course, she went on, bitterness creeping back into her voice. His medical career is over. And so is mine. No one wants to hire the wife of a fraud, even in admin. I stayed quiet. I didn't know what to say. Any words of sympathy might have sounded hollow coming from me. You must be happy, she said with defiance. You got what you wanted. You ruined our lives. I leaned forward, keeping my voice quiet. I never wanted to ruin your life, Lydia. I wanted to stop something dangerous, to protect people. And for that, you betrayed your family, she shot back. There was old anger in her eyes. No, I said, my voice firmer now. I didn't betray my family. What you and Fergus did wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. And I couldn't stand by and let it happen. She looked away, her shoulders sagging. I didn't know everything, she whispered. Fergus, he didn't tell me all the details. I just helped with the paperwork. You knew enough, I said gently but without backing down. I heard your conversations. I saw you editing those reports. Her head snapped up. I trusted my husband, she said, voice rising. Is that a crime? He told me it was all under control, that it was standard research practice, that the side effects were minimal. And you believe that? I asked, not unkindly, even when the numbers didn't add up. When you heard about patients having seizures and organ damage. She fell silent, her gaze slipping to the floor. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence spoke for her. Why did you come, Lydia? I asked after a long pause. She took a deep breath and then, to my surprise, said, G wants to live with you. I blinked. What? He said so yesterday, she explained. He told me that if we didn't let him see you, he'd sneak over anyway. He's serious about it. He's been looking up laws, cases, children's rights. I was stunned by my grandson's determination, by the sheer maturity of it. What do you want me to do? I asked carefully. Talk him out of it, she said. Tell him you can't take him in, that you don't have the space or the strength. Anything. But that's not true, I replied. I do have space. I do have the strength. And I want him in my life. So you want to take my son away too? She asked, voice breaking. You've taken our careers, our reputation, our finances, and now you want my child? I don't want to take anyone, I said calmly. But I won't lie to him. If he wants to see me, I won't say no. If he wants to stay for a while, I'll welcome him. But the decision must be his, not mine and certainly not yours. She covered her face with her hands. For a moment, I thought she'd cry, but when she lowered them, her eyes were dry, hollow. I've lost everything, she whispered. My job, my standing. Fergus is angry and broken. Cassandra won't talk to me. And now G. For the first time in that conversation, my heart softened. Whatever else she was, Lydia was still my daughter, and seeing her so worn and desperate hurt. Maybe we can try a compromise, I offered. Let G come for weekends. Give him space without taking him away completely. Lydia looked up at me. You really think that'll work? I don't know, I admitted. But it's worth a try, for his sake. She nodded slowly, like the weight of the world sat on her shoulders. Fine. He can come this weekend. We'll see how it goes. Relief coursed through me. It wasn't a victory, but it was something. And Cassandra? I asked gently. Lydia hesitated. She's having a hard time. She's not ready. Give her time. I nodded, choosing not to push. One door had opened. That was enough for now. As Lydia got up to leave, she turned back. I heard about the education fund you're setting up, she said. Yes, I confirmed. Whatever happens between us, I want to secure their future. Thank you, she said, and I could tell the words were hard to say. That will help. I nodded, not wanting to make her gratitude any heavier than it already was. She paused at the door. Can G come Friday? Of course, I said. I'll be waiting. When the door clicked shut behind her, I stood in the hallway for a long moment, absorbing the unexpected shift in our dynamic. Winifred appeared at my side and gently laid a hand on my shoulder. How did it go? Better than I thought, I said truthfully. G will be visiting. Maybe Cassandra later, too. She nodded. That's good. Kids shouldn't pay the price for their parents' mistakes. No, I agreed. But Lydia still thinks this is all my fault. She won't admit what she and Fergus did. She might never admit it, Winifred said quietly. But she might soften in time. That evening, I sat in my room, gazing out at the snow-dusted garden. Just 3 months ago, I'd been an invisible presence in my daughter's house, tolerated for the sake of appearances. Today, I was an independent woman, free from manipulation, guilt, and fear. I had faced a moral crossroad and chosen justice, though the cost was high. Yet I had no regrets. From my drawer, I took out the small box I had prepared for G's visit, his grandfather's pocket watch, polished and ticking softly. A symbol of time that moves only forward, never back. Just like life, a new chapter was beginning. One rooted not in silence and sacrifice, but in truth, respect, and hope.